content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into a chilling and deeply provocative topic: violence, mental illness, and the medications that are supposed to help. What role do psychiatric drugs really play in some of the most shocking acts of violence? Are we medicating people into stability or into chaos? David Crespi was the picture-perfect suburban successful husband, a banking executive with a beautiful wife, big house, 5 children, including twin girls who lit up every room they entered. From the outside, everything seemed perfect, but behind the polished image was a man spiraling into darkness. Then the morning of January 20th, 2006, something unthinkable happened. David Crespi snapped, and in his upscale North Carolina home, he did the unthinkable. This episode, we will pull back the curtain on the Crespi case, a chilling descent into madness that left a family shattered and a nation asking, could it happen again? So grab a drink, get comfortable, and prepare yourself to challenge what you think you know, because tonight we're peeling back the layers of a system that may be doing more harm than good. It's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, welcome to another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader. Now, mental illness always seems to be like this big pink elephant in the room. People know it's there, but that's kind of about it. You know, um, but what if that pink elephant were to break free and lose control, become violent, and destroys everything in its path? Now, but everybody's like, well, it was chained up. We thought it would be okay. And obviously, I'm using chains as a metaphor for antidepressants and medications. But, um, you know, those chains maybe were just fueling that flame. And all of a sudden, you just have this boom, a psychotic break. Well, tonight, my guest, Ed Jones, examines the controversial link between psychiatric medications and violent crimes, raising that critical question about how society treats mental illness, how we approach it, and are these medications actually doing what they're supposed to, or are they fueling something that could be like a hidden crisis? Now, in his book, Medication, Mental Illness, and Murder, What Really Happened, delves into that complex interplay between those medications and violent behavior. Now, through meticulous research and compelling narratives, Jones examines these cases where individuals with mental illness under various medications, that's important, regimens that have committed violent acts. Now, Jones' exploration is very thought-provoking and it's very timely. So I'd like to welcome Ed to the show. You actually,
Yes.
you actually kind of you kind of fell into this case. It seems like you originally you were kind of like the madmen of advertising and things like that. You've won awards, but it seems like you started writing a column.
Yes.
You started writing a column for the Charlotte Observer. Now, was this where you kind of started up on the David Crespi case, and that kind of made the book come about for you? Because this is your first book, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, no, it started earlier than than that column. My wife and I were just getting to know Kim and David Crespi in November of 2005, and
Okay.
uh, right around Christmas time in December of 2005, um, we heard through the grapevine that David was experiencing a bout of depression, and um, so like right around Christmas time. So about that time, um, you know, actually, previous to this, I had experienced 3 rounds of clinical depression myself, and so
Mhm.
when I heard that news, I mean, it really gives you empathy for others who are experiencing depression, clinical depression. And so when I
Right.
heard that news, I told my wife to get word to David through Kim that if he ever needed somebody to be with him, be there for him, talk with him, share my own experience, I would be with him yesterday. And so we got word back from Kim that David had experienced several episodes prior and that
Mhm.
they felt like he was getting the best therapy that he had ever gotten for um, his depression. So, we thought, okay, so everything's going to be okay. And then, so they came over to our house for a Christmas party. It was kind of a late Christmas party. It was almost New Year's, and
Mhm.
you know, David seemed to be acting normally, and he was teaching my wife how to properly pronounce the Hawaiian Christmas song "Mele Kalikimaka," and um,
Yeah.
so we thought nothing more of the whole thing. And then on January 20th, 2006, we got a phone call, and that phone call said it was a lady, a very religious person we know, called, and she couldn't say the word murder, but she said David Crespi today did away with his twins. And
Mhm.
so I wrote that that was almost like a dirty bomb of evil going off in our midst, the whole community. And so I almost had a form of survivor guilt in a way. It's like, if I had been by his side, could I have said something? Could I have helped? All that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
anyways, as you can imagine, I was um, very much sort of riveted by the reporting that the Charlotte Observer did. And it soon came out in the Charlotte Observer that David was on a cocktail of different drugs:
Mhm.
Ambien, Trazodone, which is an antipsychotic, and Prozac. And he had just started Prozac 7 days prior to the killings. And so,
Okay.
yeah, and I describe in the book after he killed the twins. This was about 12:37 p.m. on January the 20th. He called 911. First thing he said was, "I just killed my 2 daughters." You just
Yep.
what? The operator says, "I just killed my 2 daughters." And then,
Mhm.
tellingly, 911 female operator cuts in and says, "That's ours. Sir, are you on any medications?" He says, "Yes." And then she says, uh, um, "What kind of medications?" And he says, "Antidepressants." And this is important for you and your audience to know that 911 tape and the transcript were not released until almost 3 months after David was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole.
And when I listened to the 911 call, um, you can tell he's very just like despondent, like he's just not present. He knows what he did, but it's almost like he's like in this kind of weird space, and it's just like all he could say is just factual stuff. He wasn't crying, he wasn't yelling, he didn't like, I
That's
mean,
right.
it was literally, so I think he very well could have been
Yeah,
in a catatonic state, and mixing all those medications, especially Ambien, because People drive cars on Ambien. People are cooking
Yeah.
dinners on Ambien. There's so much stuff. So to mix that
Yeah.
with other oh my God, it's just like, yeah, it's a cocktail bomb just waiting to go off.
Hey, Carmen. Yes. I just killed my 2 daughters. You just what? I just killed my 2 daughters.
Matthew, that's ours. Sir?
Yeah.
Tell me what happened. Okay, what's going on right now?
I just freaked out and killed them.
Are you on medication?
Yeah.
Are they breathing or anything now?
They're dead.
What did you do to them?
Stabbed them.
You stabbed them?
Yeah.
What's your name, okay?
My name is David Crespi.
Tell me exactly what happened.
There's 2 dead girls. I killed them. In Boston.
Okay. Who are these girls?
They're my daughters.
Your daughters? Okay, how old are they?
5.
They're twins?
Yeah.
How did you kill them?
I died.
What kind of meds are you on, sir?
I'm on antidepressants.
Okay. Keep talking to me because you sound like you're a little bit tired and stuff, and we're wondering if you maybe took too much medication.
This is real.
Okay. I know it's real, sir. Everybody's on the way, okay? All right? How many times do you think you stabbed, sir?
I'm not
Where did you cut them?
in the body.
Okay, I realize their bodies. Where at?
Sure.
I'm sorry?
All over their bodies.
All over? Where did you say that the girls are at inside, sir?
One's on the kitchen floor and one's in the master bathroom.
One's in the kitchen floor and one's in the bathroom? David, are you sure there's nothing we can do to try to help the girls?
No. No. No.
So he was like this, they had like the perfect family. Kim was his second wife. They had 5 children together. They lived in a wonderful neighborhood. Everything seemed to be perfect, and just all of a sudden, but he had that kind of hidden depression that he was trying to, take care of and go to therapy. But on the surface, everything looked fine. So I think that's probably why it was so shocking at first. But, Kim, I give a lot of credit to her because of how she has approached this. But we will talk about that, later on in the show. But okay, so I kind of want to get a little bit of backstory on David. So he's this businessman. When did he start feeling that cloud of depression start hitting him? Was it like a midlife crisis thing, or?
No, he actually had suffered from 5 other episodes before this 6th and culminating one. So he was just an amazing career that he had going, and he had a perfect 4.0 grade point average in college. He scored in the top 5 in America, on the CPA exam the year he took it. He was the youngest CFO in the history of Sacramento Savings Bank at the age of 29. So, and it's interesting you asked the question about when depression started to kind of come into his life. So, soon after he was named the CFO, that's when his wife started to have, the symptoms that were eventually discovered to be of a brain tumor. She died of a brain tumor. Then Sacramento Savings Bank sold itself to another entity. So he had to find another job in a different, less supportive environment. So here he is, both the father and the mother in a way, single parent, taking care of 2 children at that point. And so I think almost every time that he had these episodes, it was a form of performance anxiety that came on, and it started with him having insomnia. And so what I theorized happened was, they would give him drugs like Ambien, and then that would start to make him more anxious, sort of. So they probably diagnosed that anxiety as depression. So then they would start to give him, at one point he was on Paxil. So I think that was the first, real incident, was after his wife died and he's in a new environment.
Now, one thing it always surprises me with these medications, the side effects. Okay, you take a pill for depression, things like that, but the
Yeah,
side effects could make depression worse. And one thing I can't fathom is why doctors aren't really honed in on, like, they're just throwing medications, and at some point, if you feel like that, then let me know. I don't think that's the right path
yeah,
that doctors should be taking, and just mixing all these medications together. Because one thing that I've learned, because I have a lot of health issues, I get I'm collecting autoimmune
mm-hmm,
diseases like the Pokemon cards. I got to catch them all. But one thing that I've
mm,
noticed is that you really have to dissect how things are, and each person is the treatment should be very catered to the individual and not as a whole. And I've had to learn the hard way dealing with that, and I had to
right,
fight for it to get to the right diagnosis. But with mental health, it's so tricky because there's so many things in mental health and illnesses that can be combinations of things. I mean, it's a very tricky thing. And now,
right.
leading up, when he got onto the Prozac 7 days prior to murdering his children, I hate calling it murder because I don't feel that that's the proper term for it, because I don't think he intended to, it wasn't like he sought this out. It was like not even him, I feel. But how was his behavior once he got on the Prozac? Were there any signs the week prior to him murdering his children? Did Kim notice anything? Friends, family, that week prior?
That's such a great question because I wanted to tell you about this. 15 hours before he killed his precious twin,
Mm-hmm.
he was playing a board game with his entire family. They noticed that he was starting to pace through the dining room, through the den, back to the board game. And later, Kim noticed that he was erratically jumping, go around the four corners of this rug that was beside the bed. And she was like, "What
Mm-hmm.
in the heck is going on?" Well, what that was a glaring sign that David was experiencing a side effect called akathisia.
Okay.
Akathisia is a Greek word which means the inability to sit still, and it's basically a signal that your body is going into toxicity, that psychosis is coming on, in danger of either hurting yourself or hurting others. Now, if and her family had heard about that side effect and what the signs were, those little girls would still be alive today. Could have still been alive today. But why didn't they hear about that? And that's because the pharmaceutical giants that make these drugs had for years covered up akathisia was a side effect. This is like some studies,
Mm-hmm.
10 to 25%. And you got to a good point about all the drugs. Again, so many people, and this was 2006, so of course, um, a lot of information about these side effects had not come out properly. You
Mm-hmm.
hear about them on the air now, particularly about it's just and it that you got into several important issues there with your prior comment. One is the issue of polypharmacy. Polypharmacy, that is people taking various different drugs, and sometimes the psychiatrist doesn't know what the physician is. Um, Later comes out in the book that David was actually on a fourth different kind of medication. That's clarithromycin. And
Oh.
so I was telling my physician about that. And my physician he perked up and he said, any doctor should know that combining Prozac with clarithromycin is a combustible mixture. It causes all kinds of delusions, things like that. But Prozac alone, particularly when people start it, can side effects. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think what would be important too, when it comes to prescribing and diagnosing people with mental illness, I honestly feel like you should have some type of family education as well. If you have a family member in your home that is on these kind
Hmm.
of medications, all of you be educated and learn the signs of akathisia and things like that. Now, I've been on high doses of prednisone. I can't sit still. I just feel agitated. Now, it's probably not as far as, akathisia would take, but I get that kind of psychotic just stress and chaos in your brain. Because high doses of prednisone, man, it's just like you can't sit still. It's horrible. And you know,
Yeah,
I can't imagine having psychotropic drugs on top of feeling like that, which is causing you to feel like that and have the delusions. I'm shocked that his doctors did not fully look into what they were giving him. You know, I understand we always have those medical forms we fill out. What are your medications? How honest can people be with those? Some people forget to write them down. So I feel like there needs to be some more transparency, especially when it comes to mental illness and like pain management and things like that, because then you also have to worry about addiction and other things when it comes to medications. Okay, so now let's work up to the day of. Now, the day of, Kim, his wife, she went to go get her hair cut. She didn't think anything was amiss. And so what happened after she left to go get her hair cut? How did things kind of start setting up for the catastrophe that happened 20 minutes later?
so yeah, he's at home on medical leave with just his twins and Kim, and his three older
Hmm.
children are at three different schools because they're different ages. So what happened was, soon after Kim left, um, the little girls came over to David, who was on his computer, and asked if he would like to play a game of hide and seek, and he agreed to do so. And as
Hmm.
they were finding this, he went over to the kitchen counter and got two large knives out of the butcher block. He went over to the pantry where he kind of knew where the girls would be hiding. It was their favorite hiding place, and
Hmm.
dragged them both out and tried to slaughter both of them at the same time. Um, he started with Samantha, and as he was her in the front and the back, never in the face, poor little Tessera wrested herself free and was in his closet. So he finished with Samantha. This is hard to talk about, but he went
Yes, I
upstairs.
know.
Yeah, he went upstairs, found Tessera hiding behind his clothes, dragged her out and onto the master bathroom tile
Hmm.
floor, and then proceeded to her multiple times also. And not long after that, that's when he, took off his blood-stained clothes, washed up, and called 911.
Okay, now during this whole chaotic moment, w- did he remember? I mean, did he feel like he was in control? Was he cognizant of what was happening, or did he like black out? What was his mindset during these moments?
I was given a copy of the 9-hour interview slash interrogation that David threw in the aftermath. No lawyer was present, and it's pretty clear, even to the untrained eye, that he was in the midst of a psychotic break. His hair is disheveled. at one point, like toward the end, the detectives leave him alone, and he repeats the words where this thing happened like 40 times. That's just all kinds of weird behavior throughout the 9 hours he was in. It's, you're asking somebody who was psychotic to remember what he did, and that's such an interesting area because you're in the midst of the psychotic break. How much are you able to process, and
Right.
what really is going on in your head? He said at one point in the interview that he heard these voices telling him that he had to do it now, and he later said to the police when they came to arrest him that he thought he heard the sprinkler heads in his yard telling him to kill the daughters, so
Oh,
um
God.
yeah,
Yeah. And
just
then,
clearly in a psychotic state.
yeah. And, and his family, I mean, they knew this wasn't him. Like, this was not his normal behavior. It was just, it, it's so maddening to know that this could have been prevented by not, you know, really watching him. I mean, especially with his type of, it seems like long-term treatment that he's had in the past. Why weren't these doctors kind of looking more closely on him and checking in with him and making sure? Because, I mean, from starting a new medication and a week later, you're murdering your 5-year-old twin girls. That is
Hmm.
not normal at all. We got to take a quick break. But when we come back, I kind
Yeah.
of want to talk about how, okay, he was arrested, but I want to see how was this presented in court? Now, obviously, he was found, or did he plead guilty, or did they go take it to trial and try and work this out as possible, like a mental illness thing?
No. So yeah, what happened was the DA's office in Charlotte signaled to David and Kim that they were going to go for the death, and the assistant DA had previously successfully gotten a death penalty verdict with a man named Sirianni,
Mm-hmm.
and that man had been executed. And the Crespi's defense, an excellent lawyer, had lost that case to the assistant DA, and so he was, justifiably worried that if they went to trial, that she could win such a thing again. And it was such a terrible choice about what defense they could offer because, back then the saying was that if you weren't insane going into one of North Carolina's so-called mental health institutions, those institutions would make you insane.
Yeah.
So it was, and it still, a sheriff in Cary, North Carolina, say involved with a terrible incident that involved mental illness. He and his men were, and he said in an interview that North Carolina's largest provider of mental health services is the prisons. David's lawyers urged him to accept a plea for 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. And they basically said, like, if you go another route, it's going to be such a lurid trial. It's going to be so hard on your family. That's the choice that he made.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break because I just kind of want to delve into his headspace right now as he's in prison and just see if there's something that could be appealed. And, because knowing more about how psychotropic and antidepressant drugs mix together, we have more education on it. So I'm wondering if there's something that could come about. So we'll talk about that here right after the break. Are you feeling lost, stressed, wondering if Mercury is ruining your life again, or the universe is just ghosting you? Well, you're not alone. At Love and Lotus Tarot, I keep it real. No crystal balls, no woohoo, just honest, grounded guidance to help you navigate life's chaos. Whether you need clarity on love, career, or just anything that feels like a mess, I've got you. Here's something really cool. In between tarot sessions with me, I just put out this new journal book, your very own purge journal. Don't hang on to all that angst and all that stress and all that anger. Get rid of it. Whether it's valid or not, you still have that emotion just eating away at you. So purge them onto paper, scream it, shout it, get it out. They're available right now on Amazon. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description below. Or just visit me at lovelotustarot.com and purchase your purge journal there. Visit lovelotustarot.com to book a reading, check out some of the new merch, and find the insight you've been searching for. Because let's be honest, therapy is expensive and my cards are way cooler anyways. So head on over to lovelotustarot.com now and let's figure out this thing called life together. We're back from the break. Now, we just kind of wanted to kind of go through the court case and how that case should have been brought to the light at that point as the mental illness and things like that. Now, is there anything that we could do or he could do on an appeal, even though he accepted a plea, but with the more educated stuff that we have going on? Is there something that can come about for that? Because I feel like he shouldn't be there. I think, you know what I mean? It's really kind of maddening to know that.
No, I'm glad you asked that. There is an effort that I can't talk too much about and can't name names, but there is an effort try to have his case re-examined right now. I think Lisa of my book has helped to give everybody a sense of urgency. So he has been in prison now for 19 years, and while he was in prison, he withdrew from all these drugs. After the killings, they switched him to a different cocktail of drugs. And so he was on Lexapro, Risperdal, and lithium because somebody had theorized that he had bipolar 2 disorder, which turned out to not be true. But so anyway, he withdrew from all back to his old self. And there's a 2013 Danish documentary where he's interviewed on camera, and he looks so much better than Oprah Winfrey, but he just looks like a different person. So he has not had a single violation. Well, he has had one violation in 19 years, and his only violation is he had a rosary in his jail cell that a priest gave him. So he has really a spotless record. And, he became a chaplain's assistant and helped to mentor younger men. And, he's just lived an exemplary. But yes, there is an effort right now of some people getting together and trying to get his case kind of re-adjudicated somehow.
Yeah, because one thing I find interesting too is like all his friends and family are supporting him. They're like, it's like if he was just not on these drugs, this would have not happened at all. This was like this weird
Exactly.
fluke, so to like Kim, she would still visit him at jail. Is Kim still around? I mean, are they still together? She did forgive him. She would visit him in his jail. She was still married to him.
Yeah, yes. She forgave him very quickly because she knew it was a chemically altered David that committed the horrific acts. She initially drove to prison every week to visit him for years, and then in I think it was 2014 or 15. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and she now has advanced Parkinson's disease to the point where she requires 24/7 around-the-clock care. She can't go to the bathroom by herself. She can't feed herself, and she soon won't be able to afford all that. but she is the hero of the story. And, her journal entries are really the spine of the book. And, what readers will discover is she is a true life hero of forgiveness and hope. She's the type of person who never curses the dark. She only lights a candle. And the strongest thing she's ever said about her fate is, God, what are you thinking? But I will tell you that she is very much buoyed by the release of this book and how people are starting to learn the truth about these drugs and about her husband's case.
So, when you listen to that, what do you think or feel or hear? What do you hear?
I hear what really happened that day. I had not heard that tape until last week, and I think it puts in perspective what happened that day. It's very real. It was real to him. He freaked out and he killed them, and that's what happened. And we don't understand that, and it's...
Yeah. What is amazing to me is that you are still going to prison to see him because you have forgiven him.
I have. I actually think that he was ill in a way we didn't understand. So I look at it like I don't really even think I needed to forgive him because I don't think he controlled what he did that day. So if he needs my forgiveness, which he's asked, he has it. He absolutely has it. I am so sorry that this happened for everybody, for him, for me, for our children.
Yeah.
But it happened. And I can choose to love him or I can choose to turn away.
Yeah.
And I could.
I know,
have that
that's-
choice.
So it's lifting her up.
Good, good. Because, yeah, I thought that was, very honorable and humbling to see her. I mean, immediately she was like, that wasn't my husband. That wasn't my David, and for her to come out right away and say that, I find that very honorable and brave, because everyone's like, why, what? How could you even want to even talk to him? Why would you even want to be in the same room with him? Because she knows that wasn't her husband. And he loved his daughter.
Yeah, exactly. One of the most striking moments to me in that Superior Court hearing, it wasn't a trial, it was just a hearing, was the defense lawyer toward the end had Kim on the stand to give some testimony. And he asked Kim, do you still love David, and forgive him? And she said, of course I still love David. You don't stop loving somebody because they're sick.
Right. And that, she's holding truth to her word for, that's her husband, and she knew. And I'm sure, the kids, I'm hoping the other children have kind of had a good understanding. Now, how are the other children, how were they affected, and how did they get through this tragedy and on the other side? Because they had 5 kids together, so there was 3 other ones that were older, but how are they doing? How did they process everything?
Yes, those 3 children are remarkable. They're all now young, well-functioning young adults having good careers, and they're just very admirable. They completely forgave David long ago. I think they're lifted up by this book being. I do think that through the years, every time this case comes up, they are kind of re-traumatized by it. As you go, they're there for their mom, but they want to get on with their lives as best they can, and of course that's very understandable.
Yeah. But these kind of cases just kind of showcase the dangers of pharmaceutical drugs, and you have to be aware of the signs and the side effects, and I really feel like I'm hoping we could get some legislation or something.
not really to take these drugs off the market, because obviously, they work for some people. I'm on a low dose antidepressant that just kind of keeps me even keeled through the day. I'm completely fine with it. But there are people that are more clinically depressed and they need a bigger boost. So I feel like those kind of patients really need to have somebody watch over them and have accountability from your patients. You're prescribing these drugs, so it's your job to check up on them. You know what I mean? It's the doctor. You check up on your patients. Don't wait for them to come
Yeah.
to you because they may not know. Yeah.
Yes, this you're getting in there. Every patient should know that, and I'll maybe repeat this a couple of times. You have a legal right to what is called informed consent. You have a legal right to informed consent. And there's a recent case that could be precedent setting around that whole issue. And if I could just kind of describe that to you.
For sure.
It happened out in Idaho, and it involves these antidepressants. So on May the 16th, 2018, Terry Matson, a woman with a history of alcoholism, depression, and went to the local office of the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, seeking relief from the agony of a persistent mental health issue. A physician's assistant associated with the mental health center at the department prescribed Prozac and recommended that Ms. Matson return in 2 weeks for a follow-up visit. That same day, a nurse dispensed the Prozac to Matson from a sample drawer at the department. On May 30th, 2018, Ms. Matson dutifully attended her scheduled follow-up visit, and medical records show that Matson reported that she wanted to, quote, stop Prozac and be on no meds because she didn't want, quote, crazy meds. Matson further reported that she had experienced headaches and increased anxiety since she started taking Prozac. A nurse urged Ms. Matson to continue taking the pills because the Prozac had, quote, not had enough time to build up in the body. Ms. Matson's next follow-up appointment was scheduled for June 21st, 2018. Matson later testified that on that morning, June 21st, a day that she described as an out-of-body experience, very much like David Crespi's, she woke up, attempted to call in sick to work, put on her work uniform, retrieved a .22 caliber handgun, bought a bottle of vodka, drank the entire bottle during her 10-mile drive to the department, parked in the lot outside the department, and then she survived the attempt, but she suffered grievous injuries, lost an eye, and more. So what happened in that case? What happened was some health and welfare on her behalf, alleging medical malpractice and failure to obtain informed consent related to the department's outpatient mental health services. Informed consent meaning as a doctor, you're supposed to sit down with these patients and talk about the pros and the cons, the possible side effects. They didn't do that. So what had actually happened was she had never received any handouts related to the Prozac, any warnings about the Prozac, no written materials. And, basically, and her husband was not told about what to look out for. So ultimately what happened was the Supreme Court of Idaho found in her favor against the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare and against the PA who prescribed those drugs without getting her informed setting case. And it's an important one for people to know about.
Yeah, very much so. Because it's not like it's the only one. These aren't like this is happening more and more. I mean, granted, not every time it comes to somebody dying, but just violent outbursts of behaviors and things like that. Domestic abuse is on the rise. So there are all these things that play into that, and our medications playing a part in that as well. That's why we have all this and of course, in the world we're living in today, everybody's just anxiety filled and just on edge at all times because of all the chaos that is happening around us. But, you know, it's just like, just keep building and building. And when you're on these medications and you're not aware that the medication is causing you to feel this way, you think it's just you. That is a very dangerous precedent to set for mental health and mental illness. I mean, you're putting these medications, and it even says on the warning labels, this, if you have thoughts of hurting yourself or others, and it's like, why would this be even a side effect? I thought this pill was supposed to prevent that. You know, it's maddening. And you know, and I understand
so
it.
true. Yeah, you know, there's been a, you know, as I write in the book, in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, there has been a just another epidemic of anxiety, things like that, particularly among young people, and kind of especially among young women. You know, I read somewhere that some alarming percentage of adolescent and young women, I mean, it's very alarming. And when you kind of couple that with, I mean, a lot of data has, and you do hear about this on the air now, that one of the side effects is of these drugs is, and so, you know, you would think that doctors and psychiatrists would be especially especially careful with that set of patients, adolescents and young adults and children. But here's an alarming statistic. Between 2016 and 2020, the monthly dispensing rates of antidepressants in the United States increased by 66.3% for 12 to 25-year-olds. Among 12 to 17-year-old females, the dispensing rate increased by 130%. So we have a massive effort needed in our country.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous age too, because your brain doesn't even fully develop till you're 25, and you're getting all these drugs in there. Oh God, that's so maddening. And
Great point. Yes.
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, I think, you know, having the pandemic, it just kind of, you know, it's like it threw a match in the gas can, and now we're all just like on edge at all times. We have anxiety about getting sick. We have anxiety about, you know, the healthcare costs now are going through the roof. I mean, I'm so scared I'm going to lose my healthcare because one dose of my medication on GoodRx is going for about $29,000 for my medications. I mean, have a standard of mental illness up with these pandemics, up how they approach the flu and measles and all these. They need to address it with urgency that way, instead of just kind of pushing it to the side, because then you get cases like this. A lot of people get lost in the mix as well. And, you know, like the woman, I mean, she even said she did not want to be on she says it's not making her feel right. And they just tell her, oh, just continue to do it. Well, that's why they're calling. That's the pamphlet. It says, call your doctor if you're experiencing this.
Yeah.
And that's, man, so that could have been even more preventable. That's maddening. Well, thank you so much, Ed, for coming on. Do you have a website that people can check out your book, and maybe, you know, like a blog or information, like updates on this case that people can follow?
My website is edwardleejones.com. And yes, and you can read an excerpt from the book. You can see a synopsis of the book there, some reviews. You can click on the Buy the Book tab, and there's links to my, and some links to my social media outlets. I'm on X, Facebook, and Instagram.
Perfect. And I'll have links for all of that. I'll have the Buy the Book link, your website, and so much more in today's description. But yes, thank you so much for writing this book. I know that's a lot of emotion for you. I mean, and just hearing about how listening to the 911 call is chilling. And it just shows you how despondent these medications can make somebody to the point where they are psychotic and they have no feeling whatsoever. We don't want to see people get to that state, so we need to prevent it. Another thing I would like to mention too before we go, if you need to talk to somebody, if you feel like hurting yourself, hurting others, are you taking new meds? Are you not feeling right? Please, you can call or text to 988. That is the Crisis Life Hotline. You can call, you can text them, you can chat online, you know, whatever. And I'll put a link for that in today's description as well. Because if you, especially if you're alone, try and hold yourself accountable and just kind of know the signs and symptoms as well. And just maybe have like a little journal to say, right now I'm feeling this and that. That way you can keep track. So, you know, you have some information to give these doctors when they say, hey, how is the medication going? That way you have some clear understanding of what's going on. But yes, please, if you feel like hurting yourself, if you're just in a crisis, you don't know what to do, you feel lost, please just call, text to 988, or you can go to the website at 988lifeline.org. I will have a link for that in the description as well. Well, thank you so much, Ed, and I hope to see you guys all next week.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.